My name is Rachel. I'm 28 years old, and this is the story of how I discovered the person I loved betrayed me. For years, I thought I was living the kind of romance people dream about, the kind you see in movies, the kind you read about in those sappy novels that make you secretly hope life could be just as sweet. I thought I had found my forever in Daniel. Daniel was charming in that effortless way, the kind that doesn't feel rehearsed. He had this laugh that made people lean in, like whatever he found funny must have been worth hearing. When we first met at a coffee shop near my office, he spilled his drink on himself because he was staring at me instead of watching his cup. It sounds cliche, but that was Daniel, clumsy in the little ways, confident in the big ones. He made me feel like the world noticed me because he noticed me. The early days were everything I wanted. He'd text me good morning, beautiful, before I was even awake. He'd plan little surprise dates, like grabbing tacos from the food truck I once mentioned in passing, or buying tickets to a concert of a band I loved in high school. He remembered everything, and I mean everything. My favorite color, the way I took my coffee, the fact that I hated driving at night. With Daniel, I felt seen, adored, cherished. My friends envied me. My mom told me she could hear the happiness in my voice every time I talked about him. For 2 years, I believed I was living in a fairy tale. He talked about the future with me, our future. He wanted to buy a house together, talked about the names of our future kids, even showed me Pinterest boards of kitchens he thought I'd like. We spent Sunday mornings at open houses just to look. But love has a way of blinding you, making you excuse things that should have been red flags. At first, they were small things. A text I'd send that he wouldn't answer for hours, even though I knew he wasn't at work. A story he told that didn't quite add up, but he'd laugh it off so smoothly, I'd feel silly for questioning it. Sometimes he'd disappear for entire evenings, claiming he was helping a friend with something. The first time I felt the crack, really felt it, was on my birthday. He'd always been big on celebrations, surprises, balloons, thoughtful gifts, but that year he showed up late, empty-handed, with a half-hearted excuse about work running long. He brushed it off with a kiss and a promise to make it up to me, and I let it go, because that's what you do when you're in love. You let things go. But a part of me couldn't shake the unease. It wasn't the lateness. It wasn't even the lack of a gift. It was the look in his eyes when he walked in, like he wasn't really there, like his mind was somewhere else entirely. I told myself I was overthinking, that everyone has bad days, that maybe I was being needy. That's what Daniel always told me whenever I asked too many questions. Babe, you're overthinking again. You know I love you, and I believed him because I wanted to. Still, in the quiet moments when he wasn't around, I felt it, that gnawing doubt, the sinking pit in my stomach. Love had once been easy with Daniel. Now it felt like I was constantly chasing after something that used to be mine, something that was slipping through my fingers no matter how hard I tried to hold on. Looking back, I realized the cracks were always there. They just started small enough that I could ignore them, and ignoring them was easier than facing the truth that the man I loved, the man I thought would spend forever with me, was slowly becoming a stranger. At the time, I didn't know how deep the betrayal went. I didn't know that my story wasn't going to be about love, but about lies, that the fairy tale ending I believed in was never real at all. All I knew was that something inside me was whispering that the life I thought I had with Daniel wasn't as perfect as I wanted it to be, and one day soon, that whisper would become a scream I couldn't ignore. The unease that started on my birthday didn't go away. It grew louder. At first, I brushed it off as insecurity. I told myself I'd been watching too many crime dramas, reading too many Reddit threads about cheating boyfriends. But the truth was, Daniel's behavior was changing in ways I couldn't ignore. He used to leave his phone on the counter, face up, never locked. He wasn't secretive because he didn't need to be. Now he started taking it everywhere with him, to the bathroom, to the shower, even just to grab the mail. When I asked why, he laughed and said, "You know how my friends are, always sending dumb memes. You don't want to see those." The explanation was easy enough to accept, but the way he avoided eye contact when he said it made my stomach twist. Then came the late nights. Daniel had always been reliable, If he said he'd be home at 7, he'd walk in the door by 7:05. Suddenly, work emergencies popped up constantly. He'd text me at 6 saying he had to stay late, then roll in after 10, exhausted, sometimes smelling faintly of cologne I didn't recognize. When I teased him about switching brands, he brushed it off, saying he grabbed whatever was on sale, but I remembered his old bottle sitting on our dresser, still half full. Little lies piled up like pebbles, each one small enough to kick aside, but together they weighed me down. One night I asked him directly, "Daniel, is there something going on you're not telling me?" He froze just a second too long before forcing a smile. "Rachel, come on, don't start. You know I love you." He wrapped his arms around me, kissed the top of my head, and told me I was being paranoid. And for a while, I believed him, because when you love someone, you want to believe them. But the gaslighting started to creep in. I'd point out something strange, like the dinner receipt I found in his jacket pocket from a restaurant we'd never been to, and he'd twist it back on me. "Why are you going through my things, Rachel? Do you not trust me? That's not healthy." Suddenly, I was the problem. I was the one who needed to change. He made me question my own instincts, and that was maybe the cruelest part. The intimacy between us shifted too. Daniel used to reach for me first thing in the morning, used to look at me like I was the only person in the room. Now his touches felt mechanical, rushed. His compliments dried up. Sometimes he'd just sit on the couch, scrolling on his phone while I tried to talk about my day. When I pressed him, he'd sigh and say, "You always think something's wrong. Why can't you just relax?" My friends noticed. One night over drinks, my best friend Jessica leaned in and asked quietly, "Is everything okay with you and Daniel? You don't sound as happy as you used to." I laughed it off, said we were just stressed with work, but inside her words rattled me. If other people could see the cracks, maybe I wasn't imagining them. The worst moment came one Friday night. Daniel said he was working late, but I had this gnawing feeling I couldn't shake. Hours passed, and by 11, I was pacing the living room, staring at my phone, debating whether to call. Finally, I did. It rang 3 times before he answered, his voice low like he'd stepped outside. "Babe, I told you, I'm at the office. I'll be home soon." But in the background, I could hear laughter. High-pitched, feminine laughter. When he walked through the door an hour later, I asked him point blank, who was that laughing in the background? His eyes hardened just for a moment before he covered it with a smirk. "Rachel, you're hearing things. You've been so stressed lately. Maybe talk to someone about it?" And just like that, he turned it around again. I went to bed that night staring at the ceiling, feeling more alone lying next to him than I ever had in my life. That was the beginning of the end. I didn't know it yet, but the lies were no longer just cracks in the foundation. They were the start of a full collapse. And the person I loved, the man I thought I knew better than anyone, was about to show me just how deep betrayal could cut. The first real crack in the illusion came on a random Tuesday, the kind of night that should have been ordinary. Daniel had said he'd be working late again, something that had become almost routine in the past 2 months. I wanted to believe him, but the unease I'd been swallowing down for weeks finally reached a breaking point. I was scrolling on my phone when I got a message from Jessica. "Hey, are you and Daniel free this weekend? I saw him downtown earlier, but he didn't see me. Looked like he was with someone?" My blood ran cold. I stared at the screen, rereading it 3-4 times. Downtown? With someone? Daniel had told me he was at the office all day. I typed back quickly, trying to sound casual. "Oh, who was he with?" Jessica hesitated before replying. "Didn't get a clear look, just a woman. They went into a restaurant. Sorry, maybe it was work?" I wanted so badly for it to be work, but something inside me whispered otherwise. I sat there in the living room, lights dim, staring at the clock. Every minute ticked by like an accusation. When Daniel finally came home, it was nearly 11. He smelled faintly of perfume, not mine, not anything I recognized. I forced a smile and asked, "Long night?" He nodded, tossing his bag down and loosening his tie like nothing was wrong. "Yeah, big project. My boss is killing me." I watched him as he poured himself a glass of water, his movements too casual, too rehearsed. My heart was pounding, but I couldn't hold back. "Jessica said she saw you downtown today with someone. Were you at a restaurant?" His eyes flickered just for a second before narrowing. "What? No, Rachel, seriously? You're really gonna start again? Jessica probably saw someone else. Why are you so eager to believe the worst about me?" That was his strategy. Turn it back on me, make me question my own sanity, and for a moment, I almost did. But deep down, I knew. The following week, I decided to stop ignoring the signs. One night, while Daniel was in the shower, I reached for his phone. My hands were shaking, the screen was locked, and suddenly a wave of nausea hit me. He'd never locked his phone before. It was the proof I didn't even need to see. He came out of the bathroom, towel around his waist, and when he saw me holding the phone, his face darkened. "What are you doing?" His voice was sharp, almost threatening. "I was just going to check the time," I lied. He yanked the phone from my hand, slipped it into his pocket, and muttered, "Unbelievable." Then he walked away, leaving me standing there with a pit in my stomach so deep it felt like I'd never climb out. That night, I lay awake next to him, listening to his steady breathing while my mind screamed. Something was going on, and if I didn't find out the truth soon, I was going to lose my grip completely. The discovery came by accident. A few days later, while Daniel was at work, I was folding laundry when I noticed a receipt crumpled at the bottom of his pants pocket. My hands froze as I smoothed it out. It was for dinner at a fancy Italian restaurant. 2 entrees, 2 glasses of wine, 1 dessert. The date and time were stamped clearly, the same night he'd told me he was working late. I felt my chest tighten, my throat closing up. I sat down on the bed, clutching that little slip of paper like it was a death certificate. In a way, it was the death of the relationship I thought I had. When he came home that night, I didn't say anything right away. I watched him eat the dinner I cooked, watched him talk about how exhausted he was from the office. Finally, I pulled the receipt from my pocket and slid it across the table. He froze, staring at it. For a moment, I saw the mask slip, the panic in his eyes, the tightening of his jaw. Then, just as quickly, he smirked and leaned back. "Rachel, seriously? You're going through my clothes now? That was with a client. Do you know how embarrassing it is that you can't even trust me enough to believe that?" But this time, the lie didn't land. I shook my head slowly, tears burning my eyes. "Clients don't share dessert, Daniel." He slammed his fork down, his voice rising. "You always have to twist everything. I can't even breathe without you accusing me. This is toxic, Rachel. You're the one ruining this relationship." I sat there, silent, staring at him while my heart broke in real time. He stormed off to the bedroom, muttering under his breath about how suffocating I was. That night, I cried myself to sleep, but beneath the tears, something else started to grow, a seed of anger, of resolve. If Daniel thought he could betray me and gaslight me into silence, he was about to find out just how wrong he was. Because I wasn't just going to sit back and let him destroy me. I was going to find out the truth, and one day I'd make sure he regretted every lie he ever told me. The weeks that followed the receipt incident were the hardest I had ever lived through. I kept trying to convince myself I was overreacting, that maybe Daniel really had been with a client, that maybe I was just paranoid, but the truth kept slipping through the cracks, like water trying to escape a dam. No matter how tightly I held on, I couldn't stop it. His pattern started shifting. Suddenly, he had more late nights at the office, more urgent projects that couldn't wait until morning. His phone, once left casually on the kitchen counter, now never left his pocket. He guarded it like it was the crown jewels. And the way he looked at me had changed too, less warmth, less patience, like he was irritated by my very existence. One Friday night, I called him around 9 p.m. He answered on the 3rd ring, his voice muffled, like he was covering the phone. "Hey, I'm still at work. I'll be late. Don't wait up." But in the background, I heard something. Laughter. A woman's laughter. My chest tightened like a vice. I wanted to scream, but instead, I said nothing. I just hung up. The next morning, he came home with the same excuse: overnight work session. He smelled faintly of a perfume I couldn't name. Not mine, not anyone I knew. I remember sitting at the kitchen table that morning, staring at him as he poured himself coffee, acting like nothing had happened. My hands shook so badly I had to clench them in my lap. I wanted to throw the mug at him, to demand the truth, but I was terrified of the answer. It wasn't just lies anymore, it was humiliation. The first time it went public, I wasn't even prepared. I had gone out to pick up groceries, and as I was loading bags into my car, I saw him, Daniel, across the street. He wasn't alone. He was standing outside a cafe with a woman, leaning in too close, his hand on her waist. She was laughing, touching his arm like they'd known each other forever. My heart plummeted into my stomach. I froze, clutching a bag of apples so tightly the plastic tore. For a moment, I thought maybe I was hallucinating, maybe it wasn't him. But then he turned, his profile unmistakable, and I knew. I didn't confront him right then. I couldn't. My body was shaking, my throat locked tight. Instead, I drove home, parked the car, and sat there for nearly an hour staring at nothing. My groceries melted in the heat, but I didn't even notice. That night, when he came home, he kissed me on the cheek, like always, and mumbled something about exhausting meetings. I smiled back, silent. Inside, I was burning alive. It got worse. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. He didn't even bother hiding it anymore. Texts at midnight, secretive phone calls where he'd step outside, claiming it was work, and the late nights turned into entire weekends where he had to fly out for business. One Saturday, I decided to follow him. My hands were sweating as I trailed his car from a distance, heart hammering in my chest. He drove across town to a quiet restaurant, parked, and walked inside. 10 minutes later, she arrived. The same woman from the cafe, long hair, perfectly styled, the kind of beauty that makes people turn their heads. I sat there in my car, stomach twisting as I watched him greet her with a hug that lasted too long. They didn't look like coworkers, they looked like lovers. My vision blurred with tears, but I couldn't look away. I watched them order wine, laugh, share food like they'd done it 100 times before. When his hand brushed hers across the table, something inside me shattered. I wanted to storm inside, flip the table, scream at both of them, but I didn't. I stayed in that car until they left, until I watched him walk her to her car, kiss her cheek, and linger in a way that told me everything I needed to know. That night, he came home, kissed me lightly, and said, "You wouldn't believe how stressful today was." And I realized then he was no longer even trying to protect me from the truth. He was humiliating me, lying to my face while I already knew everything. It wasn't just betrayal, it was cruelty. The shame of it all settled into my bones. I felt small, invisible, worthless. I stopped telling my friends what was happening because I didn't want to see pity in their eyes. I started withdrawing, going silent, moving through the days like a ghost. Daniel noticed, and instead of caring, he weaponized it. "What's your problem lately? You're so depressing to be around. Maybe if you loosened up a little, things would be better between us." It was like he was daring me to break, daring me to leave, but I wasn't ready. Not yet. Because a part of me still clung to hope, still wanted to believe the man I loved was buried under all those lies. But deep down, I knew the Daniel I thought I loved didn't exist anymore. Maybe he never did. And as the betrayal escalated, so did my anger. It was no longer just pain, it was rage. Silent, simmering rage. I didn't know how and I didn't know when, but I promised myself one day he would feel every ounce of the humiliation he had poured onto me. If part 4 was about humiliation, part 5 was about collapse. Everything I thought I was, confident, strong, worthy, slipped through my fingers like sand, leaving me with nothing but shame. The morning after I saw Daniel with that woman at the restaurant, I could barely get out of bed. My body felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. My chest ached constantly, not from any illness, but from heartbreak that refused to loosen its grip. I remember lying there, staring at the ceiling, wondering how I had gotten here, how I had become the kind of woman who let a man crush her spirit while she stood by in silence. Daniel noticed, of course. How could he not? I was quieter, thinner, my face hollowed from sleepless nights and skipped meals. But instead of concern, he gave me criticism. "You should take better care of yourself," he sneered one evening as I sat curled up on the couch. "No wonder I'm not happy. Look at you." The words cut deeper than anything else. Not only was he betraying me, but now he was blaming me for his betrayal. It was like living in a nightmare where everything was twisted, where the person who had hurt me most was making me feel guilty for being hurt. I stopped calling my friends. I stopped answering texts. At work, I was a shell of myself, distracted and fragile. My boss pulled me aside once, asking if I was okay, and I lied, forcing a smile. How could I explain that my life was crumbling, that I was too ashamed to admit I was with a man who didn't love me anymore? The breaking point came one Sunday. We were supposed to go to his mother's house for dinner. I'd been dreading it all week, putting on a fake smile, pretending everything was fine while he played the perfect boyfriend in front of his family. But that afternoon, Daniel came into the living room, already dressed, adjusting his tie in the mirror. I asked, "What time are we leaving?" He didn't even look at me. "We're not. I'm going alone." "Why?" I asked, confused. He turned, his face cold, eyes sharp. "Because honestly, Rachel, you're depressing to be around. My family doesn't need to see you like this. Get yourself together." And then he left, just like that. I stood there in the silence of our apartment, shaking from head to toe. The tears came fast and uncontrollable, streaming down my face until my skin burned. I fell to the floor, clutching my chest, sobbing like my body was trying to expel every ounce of pain at once. That night, I didn't eat, I didn't sleep. I just sat in the dark, staring at the door, waiting for him to come back. He didn't. He stayed out all night. When he finally walked in the next morning, sunglasses still on, shirt wrinkled, smelling of perfume that wasn't mine, he didn't bother apologizing. He just muttered, "Don't start with me," and shut himself in the bedroom. That was my rock bottom. I realized in that moment that I had lost myself completely. I was no longer Rachel, the ambitious, fun, vibrant woman I had once been. I was a ghost haunting my own life. But sometimes rock bottom is necessary, because once you hit it, you have no choice but to rise. The first flicker of hope came in the smallest form, a text message. It was from my best friend, Emily. We hadn't spoken in weeks. I had ignored her calls, her invitations, her concern, but she hadn't given up. Her message read, "I don't know what's going on, but I miss you. Please don't shut me out. Let me come over. No judgment, I promise." I stared at those words for nearly half an hour, tears blurring my vision again. But this time, they weren't just tears of pain, they were relief. Someone still cared, someone still saw me. I typed back, hands trembling, "Okay, come over tonight." That night, when Emily walked through my door, I collapsed into her arms. For the first time in months, I let myself be vulnerable, telling her everything about the late nights, the perfume, the other woman, the humiliation, the cruelty. Emily listened, her eyes fierce, her grip on my hand steady. When I finally finished, my voice hoarse from crying, she looked me dead in the eye and said, "Rachel, you are not crazy. You are not worthless. And you are not alone in this. He doesn't get to destroy you, not unless you let him." Her words lit a spark inside me. It wasn't much, not yet, but it was enough to remind me that I was still here, that I still had fight left in me. Daniel might have pushed me to rock bottom, but Emily's presence reminded me of something important. I wasn't going to stay there. That night, as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I whispered to myself, "This is not the end, this is the beginning." Because from that moment on, I wasn't just a victim, I was someone ready to rise again. And one day soon, Daniel would regret underestimating me. The day after Emily came over, I woke up with puffy eyes and a headache that felt like punishment. But for the first time in months, I also woke up with a plan, half-formed, fragile, but real. I didn't dress it up as revenge yet. I called it something gentler so I wouldn't scare myself, getting my life back. Emily showed up again that afternoon with iced coffee and a grocery bag full of food I'd stopped buying. Fresh fruit, yogurt, real bread. She moved around my kitchen like she'd been there 100 times, which she had, only I'd forgotten what it felt like to be cared for. "Small steps," she said, slicing an apple and handing me a plate. "Food, shower, air, then we'll talk strategy." Strategy, the word landed like a stone in a lake. Ripples of courage spread out from it. I showered for the first time in longer than I cared to admit. I scrubbed mascara stains off my cheeks, washed the perfume I didn't wear out of my hair, and stood there under hot water until the noise inside me softened. When I stepped out, I pulled on jeans and a soft sweatshirt and looked at myself in the mirror. My face was thinner, my eyes were tired, but I recognized the expression staring back for the first time in weeks, stubborn, not defeated. Back in the kitchen, Emily had formed 2 neat stacks on the table, a small spiral notebook and a clear folder. "Information is power," she said evenly. "He's been controlling the narrative because he's been controlling the facts. You take that back." I ran my fingertips over the notebook's cardboard cover. It was nothing, $2 at the drugstore, but it felt like a weapon. I opened the first page and dated it. Then I wrote what I knew, like a police report. Times, places, what he said, what I saw, what I smelled on his clothes. I left out how it made me feel. That would come later. Facts first, feelings after. When I finished, the page looked clinical, almost cold, but for the first time in months, my chest expanded all the way when I breathed. I wasn't chasing shadows anymore. I was building a record. Emily nodded toward the folder. Digital twins, she said. Receipts, screenshots, copies of phone logs, whatever's yours or shared. Don't break laws. Don't snoop where you don't have consent. Just collect what belongs to you and protect it. Protect it. Protect me. That night, I made a private email account and sent scanned copies to myself. Restaurant receipts I'd found in his pockets, calendar gaps that matched his work emergencies, a photo I'd snapped of the wine-stained napkin he brought home by mistake. I kept duplicates on a flash drive and handed it to Emily. If anything happens to me or to my stuff, this lives with you. She took it without drama and slipped it into her bag. Done. I practiced quiet for a few days, not the silence of fear, but the silence of discipline. I stopped asking Daniel where he was. I stopped giving him emotions he could weaponize. I cooked meals for myself and ate them. I went for walks without apologizing. When he complained that I was distant, I shrugged and said, "I'm tired." And it was true, but I was also something else, focused. Jessica texted me later that week. We hadn't talked since the day she'd spotted him downtown. "Can I see you?" she asked. I hesitated, shame, old habit, then typed back, "Yes." We met at my place, legs tucked under us on the couch like high school, and I told her everything. She took my hand and said, without pity, "I should have pushed harder when I saw him. I'm here now." It wasn't an apology I needed from her. It was solidarity. Stay present. I got both. And then came the moment that shifted something I didn't know could still move. I stopped waiting for Daniel to admit anything and started preparing for him to deny everything. That mental flip changed the whole board. I stopped crafting the perfect question and started assembling the unanswerable timeline. I stopped practicing speeches and started drawing maps. What days, which places, how long, with who? A blank I didn't need to fill to prove the shape of the truth. I set boundaries in writing for the first time. Short, boring, and clear. I typed an email from our shared account and CC'd my private one so it would live in more than one place. If you're going to be late, tell me by 6 p.m. We share rent. On the first of the month, your half transfers automatically. No exceptions. I will not tolerate insults about my body, my mental health, or my friendships. If it happens again, I will leave the room and end the conversation. No drama, no threats, forwardable facts. He read it on his phone at the kitchen counter, mouth pulling into a sneer. Wow, corporate Rachel, should I sign at the bottom? You should follow it, I said. My voice didn't shake. That startled both of us. He stared at me, trying to find the version of me who would cry. When he didn't find her, he grabbed his keys and left. He stayed gone until after midnight. In the morning, I logged the time. The habit wasn't obsessive anymore. It was method. I booked a session with a counselor, referral through my work benefits, anonymous and practical. I didn't attach a name to the person in the chair across from me because I didn't want one more character in this story. I wanted a mirror that didn't lie. I talked until my ribs hurt. The counselor asked questions that didn't feel like knives. What do you know to be true? What are you pretending not to know? If you had to keep yourself safe for 30 days, what would you do? I wrote the answers down after in my little notebook as if I could stitch myself together with ink. 30 days. I could do 30 days. I opened a separate bank account in my name only and diverted my direct deposit. I gathered documents I'd care about if I had to leave in a hurry, passport, birth certificate, work contracts, and photographed each one before placing them in a folder under my bed. I moved sentimental things first. Letters, the necklace my mother gave me, a bookmark Jessica made me in 7th grade. I took them to Emily's apartment in a tote bag that used to carry beach towels. It was the least cinematic getaway plan in history, and also the most grown-up thing I'd done all year. Meanwhile, Daniel escalated, like people do when the old levers stop working. He tried being sweeter when that didn't pull me back into doubt. He tried being crueler. "No man wants a woman who keeps score," he said, glancing at my notebook. "You're making me the bad guy in your little diary." "You made yourself the bad guy," I said softly. "I'm just not throwing out the evidence." He laughed without humor. "Evidence? For what? You're not taking me to court, Rachel." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. For once, the silence worked in my favor. The more I stabilized, the sloppier he became. He started leaving earlier and coming home later, confident that my new stillness meant surrender. He let a receipt sit on the dashboard for 2 days. I photographed it, filed it, and didn't mention it. He told me he'd slept at the office one Tuesday, then posted a late-night story hours earlier with a skyline that didn't match. Just a flash before he deleted it. I already had the screenshot. On a Thursday, I offered date night, sushi at the place we used to love, 8 o'clock. He declined without looking up from his phone. "Can't. Work." 10 minutes later, his phone lit up with a notification, preview he forgot to turn off. I didn't need the name, just the timestamp, 8:15. The bubbles of laughter in his throat when he typed. I didn't cry that night. I made tea, turned on a lamp, and built the timeline cleanly, like a set of spreadsheet columns, only I could see. Left at 5:42, seen downtown at 6:19, reservation charge at 7:58, home at 11:13, shower, new perfume, work emergency. I didn't recognize the woman I'd become, someone who could look at her own heartbreak with the detachment of an analyst. But I respected her. She had climbed out of bed. She had fed herself. She had stopped asking for the truth and started making it undeniable. The turning point wasn't a single aha moment. It was a sequence of quiet decisions that added up to a life raft. I would stop explaining myself to someone committed to misunderstanding me. I would gather proof for my future self, the one who would need it. I would reclaim my time, my money, my safety, and my voice. And I would decide how the end would happen on my terms, not as a scene he could twist into crazy girlfriend loses it, not as a midnight flight with a trash bag of clothes. I wanted daylight and witnesses. I wanted the kind of truth that doesn't require me to raise my voice. So I set a date in my head, 4 Saturdays from now, enough time to get my ducks in a row. Enough time for him to hand me the last pieces without realizing it. Enough time to tell the people who loved me what might be coming. Jessica and Emily, no one else. We sat together at my kitchen table, my two constants, and rehearsed contingencies the way people practice fire drills. If he raged, we had exits. If he smeared, we had receipts. If he begged, we had boundaries. I wrote one last email, neutral, archival, impossible to misinterpret. We need honesty, counseling, and transparency. If you refuse, I will end the relationship. I will argue, I won't shout, I will simply be done. He replied 20 minutes later, "You're being dramatic. Stop threatening me. If you were really gonna leave, you would have by now." I read it twice and felt something settle inside me. Not sadness, not shock, something steady, like a final puzzle piece sliding into place with a soft, inevitable click. I was done trying to be the woman he would stop betraying. I was becoming the woman he could no longer fool. And once you cross that line, there's only one direction left. Next came the quiet choreography of consequences, the kind you prepare in plain sight. The folder labeled truth moved from my desk to my tote bag. The spare key went back on the hook where it belonged. None missing, none hidden. The plants were watered. The rent was covered for the month. The suitcase under the bed had 3 days of clothes and nothing sentimental. The sentimental things were already safe. I fell asleep early that night with the lamp on, my notebook closed, and my phone on Do Not Disturb. I dreamed of nothing. I woke up rested, I made coffee, and for the first time since this began, I felt the charge of forward motion in my bones. Not frantic, not panicked. I wasn't chasing him anymore. I was building a runway. Revenge, I was learning, doesn't always start with rage. Sometimes it starts with a woman eating breakfast, paying her own bills, and refusing to be lied to one more day. 4 Saturdays. The clock had started. The decision to fight back didn't just flicker in me anymore, it burned. For weeks, I'd been collecting evidence in small, careful ways. Every text message Blake sent that felt off, I screenshotted. Every phone call that ended abruptly when I walked into the room, I noted the time. And every whispered conversation he had outside our apartment, thinking I couldn't hear through the thin walls, I wrote down in a journal. I wasn't just a woman scorned anymore. I was a woman preparing for war. Emily became my second set of eyes and ears. She reminded me that revenge wasn't just about making him hurt, it was about reclaiming my dignity and showing him that I wasn't weak. She even connected me with her cousin, Jason, who worked in IT and knew how to recover deleted files. Within a couple hours of having access to my laptop and Blake's shared cloud account, Jason handed me a folder that shattered any lingering doubt. There were pictures, not just of Blake and Rachel together, but of them on trips I thought he'd taken alone for work. A weekend in Nashville, she was there with him. That conference in Chicago, she was in the hotel room with him. And the most disgusting part, he had saved intimate videos, hidden in folders labeled with fake project names. My hands shook as I scrolled through them, but with every click, my resolve hardened. He wasn't just cheating, he was documenting it, keeping trophies. I realized then that Blake had built his little kingdom on arrogance. He believed I'd never find out. He believed that even if I did, I wouldn't have the courage to fight back. That belief was my weapon. I could already imagine the look on his face when I turned his lies inside out. The first step was social. Blake thrived on his reputation. In our town, he was the reliable contractor, the charming guy who shook hands with neighbors, volunteered at the community fair, and always posted polished updates about our perfect relationship. He used me like a prop in his little show, so I decided the truth would also go public. I didn't move too fast, though. I had to make him comfortable enough not to suspect anything. I still cooked dinner some nights, still kissed his cheek when he came home, still let him believe that I was the same trusting Anna he'd always underestimated. Meanwhile, I planted seeds. I started joining community Facebook groups he followed and quietly interacted with people he networked with. I rebuilt connections with mutual friends. I distanced myself because of him, I was setting the stage so when the curtain fell, everyone would be watching. The second step was legal. Jason helped me connect with a lawyer who specialized in family and property law. She explained that since Blake and I weren't married yet, I actually had more leverage than I thought. All the receipts, the shared accounts, the texts, those were evidence not just of cheating, but of financial misuse. He had used my money for some of those trips, charging expenses to our joint account while lying to my face. That wasn't just betrayal, it was fraud. The lawyer advised me to keep building my paper trail, and I did. Every statement, every withdrawal, every late night Uber receipt he tried to hide, I filed it away like ammunition. But the most satisfying step was emotional. I began pulling back piece by piece, not in a way that made him suspicious, but in a way that made him dependent. When he asked me to do his laundry, I said I was busy. When he wanted me to cover for him at family events, I said I wasn't feeling well. I stopped feeding his ego with constant support, and slowly he started to crumble. Blake was used to me being his shadow, quiet, reliable, always there. Without that, he grew paranoid. He'd glance at my phone more often, ask where I was going, even show up at Emily's unannounced once. He was losing control, and the irony was delicious. He had no idea the reason he felt so uneasy was because I was the one pulling strings behind the scenes. The night that confirmed I was on the right track happened at a dinner party one of his friends hosted. Blake strutted around, drink in hand, telling stories like he always did. He introduced me as his future wife, and I played the role, smiling politely, nodding. But then one of his buddies, a little drunk, muttered something under his breath to him, something like, "Careful, man, your side piece might get jealous." Blake froze, then laughed too loudly, brushing it off, but my ears caught it. That was the crack in his facade, proof that his little secret wasn't as secret as he thought. If his own friends were aware, then exposing him would sting even more. Driving home that night, I sat silently in the passenger seat, pretending I hadn't heard. Inside, I was already scripting the reveal. It wouldn't be a single dramatic moment. It would be a cascade, one leak after another until his entire double life collapsed. By the time we pulled into the driveway, Blake was humming along to the radio like nothing had happened. But me, I was already smiling to myself because I knew the storm was coming, and he had no clue he was standing in the middle of it. I had rehearsed this moment in my head so many times that it felt almost cinematic when the pieces started to fall into place. Every lie Blake had told me, every smirk he gave when he thought I was too naive to catch on, every late night whisper he thought was hidden, I was about to weaponize all of it. By now, I had everything I needed. Screenshots of his texts with Rachel, photos of them on trips I'd supposedly imagined, receipts proving he used our joint account to fund their little getaways, even those vile videos he kept as trophies. I wasn't just holding a smoking gun, I was sitting on an arsenal. And Blake, in his arrogance, had no idea the walls were closing in on him. Emily and I spent hours mapping out exactly how it would go down. I didn't want to simply leave him. That would have been too easy for him. Men like Blake, who thrive on appearances, only feel true pain when their image shatters. His whole identity was wrapped up in being the charming contractor, the perfect boyfriend, the man everyone trusted. So I decided to take that away in one calculated blow. The opportunity came faster than I expected. His company had just finished a large renovation project for a wealthy family in town, and Blake insisted on hosting a celebration dinner at our place. He wanted to show off the new grill he bought, ironically, with my money, and invite not only the clients, but also his parents, a few of our mutual friends, and some of his crew. It was the perfect audience. For days, I played the part of the doting partner, helping him plan, cooking, arranging, making sure he had no reason to suspect I was anything but loyal. Inside, my nerves burned, but my determination was steel. The night of the dinner, our house buzzed with laughter, clinking glasses, and the smell of steaks on the grill. Blake was in his element, holding court, flashing that smile he used to fool everyone. He even raised a glass, toasting to honesty, loyalty, and hard work. The irony almost made me choke. I waited until the perfect moment, when the wine had loosened tongues, when the guests were comfortable, when Blake's guard was at its lowest. Then I stood up, glass in hand. "Can I say a few words?" I asked, my voice steady, though my hands trembled slightly. Blake beamed at me, probably expecting me to gush about how proud I was of him. "Of course, Anna," he said, resting his hand on my back. I stepped out of his touch and moved to the center of the room. "I just want to thank everyone for being here tonight. It means a lot to Blake, and it means a lot to me. Because, honestly, I think it's time people knew the full story of who Blake really is." The room quieted. Blake chuckled nervously. "Anna," he muttered, trying to reel me back in, but I kept going. "You all know Blake as a hardworking man, a loyal partner, someone you can trust," I said, holding my phone up. "But what you don't know is that while he was standing here calling me his future wife, he was also funding trips and hotel stays with another woman. While he was telling me I was paranoid, he was taking Rachel, yes, Rachel, on vacations with our money. And while he was kissing me goodnight, he was recording things with her that no decent man should ever record." Gasps filled the room. Blake shot to his feet, face red. "That's enough," he barked, but his voice cracked under the weight of my words. I clicked my phone and the TV lit up with mirrored images, screenshots, receipts, photos, every lie projected in front of his friends, his family, his clients. The silence in the room was suffocating, broken only by the sound of Blake's shallow breathing as he stared at the evidence of his betrayal. His mother covered her mouth, his father shook his head. The wealthy client muttered something about unprofessional and stood, already pulling out his phone. Emily, bless her, was there too, standing at the back of the room, giving me a look of fierce pride. Blake lunged toward me, but Jason, Emily's cousin, who'd quietly joined us that night, stepped in front of him. "Don't," Jason warned, his voice low and dangerous. I looked Blake straight in the eye, my voice calm but cutting. "You built your life on lies, Blake. Lies to me, lies to everyone in this room. And now, the truth is right here. You can't gaslight me out of this. You can't charm your way out of this. It's over." His carefully crafted image crumbled in real time. The clients excused themselves, disgust written all over their faces. His parents couldn't even look at him. His friends, who once laughed at his stories, sat in silence, their trust shattered. Rachel wasn't there, thank God, but I knew word would reach her by morning. Blake tried to speak, stumbling over excuses, but every word only made him look smaller. The man who once strutted through life like he owned it was now standing in a living room full of people who saw him for what he really was: a fraud, a cheat, a coward. When it was clear the party was over, I put my glass down and picked up the overnight bag I had packed days ago. "I won't be here when you come back from whatever hole you crawl into," I said. "You don't get me anymore, Blake. You don't get my money, my support, or my silence. You're on your own now." And with that, I walked out the door. Emily followed me, her hand squeezing mine. Behind us, the house that once felt like a home was now nothing more than Blake's crumbling stage. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't collapse. For the first time in months, I felt free. The revenge wasn't just in exposing him. It was in watching him lose everything he valued most: his reputation, his pride, his control. The weeks that followed the courtroom victory felt surreal. For so long, my life had been defined by betrayal, humiliation, and the constant ache of wondering if I'd ever have the strength to stand tall again. Now, the dust was settling, and I had to face the truth that winning didn't erase the scars. It simply gave me a chance to start over. I still woke up some nights in a cold sweat. Replaying the moment, I learned the truth about Michael, the shock of seeing him with someone else, the humiliation of realizing how deep the lies had run. Even though he had been exposed and stripped of everything he thought he could get away with, those memories clung to me. Healing wasn't about pretending they hadn't happened. It was about learning how to live with them without letting them define me. One thing I learned in therapy was that grief doesn't only come when someone dies. Grief comes when love dies, when trust dies, when the future you thought you had crumbles into dust. I had to grieve the version of myself that once believed Michael's promises. And grieving meant letting myself feel it fully: anger, sadness, disappointment, without rushing to push it away. It was messy, and there were days I felt like I was going backward. But little by little, I started to see glimpses of the woman I was becoming. Rachel was there every step of the way. She reminded me that my worth had never been tied to whether or not Michael was faithful. She pushed me to rediscover the things I loved before I got lost in him: my passion for teaching art classes at the community center, my weekend walks by the lake, the way I used to get lost in sketching for hours without even noticing the time. Picking up a pencil again felt like reclaiming a piece of myself he had nearly destroyed. There was also the quiet freedom of no longer living in fear. No more second-guessing texts, no more analyzing late-night excuses, no more waiting for the next betrayal to come crashing down. My home finally felt like a safe place again, a place where peace could breathe instead of chaos taking over. Michael, on the other hand, became a ghost in town. People whispered about him when he walked into the diner, about how he lost his job, about how his so-called friends disappeared when the truth came out. I didn't have to lift another finger. His reputation carried the weight of his choices. Watching him crumble wasn't about satisfaction anymore. It was about closure. The same man who once had me convinced I was powerless now lived with the truth that I was the one who finally took my power back. I even found myself forgiving not him, but myself, forgiving myself for staying too long, for ignoring the red flags, for believing that love meant enduring endless pain. The forgiveness wasn't about excusing what happened. It was about letting go of the shame I carried, the shame that didn't belong to me in the first place. And as life moved forward, so did I. I didn't rush into dating again. I didn't feel the need to prove anything to anyone. Instead, I poured my energy into the small joys of daily life: the smell of coffee in the morning, the sound of laughter at Rachel's kitchen table, the simple relief of sleeping peacefully through the night. One day, while I was packing up some old boxes, I found a photo of Michael and me from years ago. We looked so young, so in love, so full of dreams. For a moment, a lump rose in my throat. But then I set it down, smiled to myself, and whispered, "That chapter is over." And I meant it. Because the truth is, betrayal had taken so much from me, but it had also given me something I never expected: clarity. Clarity about who I was, what I deserved, and what I would never tolerate again. If you've ever been where I was, broken, betrayed, and wondering if you'll ever find yourself again, let me remind you, the strength you need might come from places you don't yet recognize. It might come from a friend you haven't spoken to in years, or even from someone you haven't met yet. Sometimes the turning point arrives from the most unexpected source. Have you ever lived through a moment like that? The time when the support or strength you needed showed up out of nowhere? Don't forget to like and subscribe if this story resonated with you, and share it with someone who might need to hear that even the darkest betrayals can lead to unexpected light. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, your story is still being written, and the next chapter might be brighter than you can imagine.